My moment of never giving up, that's when I first learned. I used to spend the night in hotel parking lots. Everything I had was in 2 bags.
Before he ruled daytime television, before the suits, the mansions, and the $1 million smile, Steve Harvey was sleeping in a 1976 Ford Tempo, using a cooler as a refrigerator and gas station sinks to wash up before comedy gigs. Most people know Steve as the sharp-tongued host of Family Feud or the motivational speaker dropping fire quotes about success. But what they don't know, what few even talk about, is just how far this man fell before he rose to the top. This is not just a rags-to-riches story. This is the story of a man who lost it all, twice. A man who stared failure, humiliation, and total collapse in the face, and somehow came back stronger. What pushed him over the edge? What nearly destroyed his career? And what secret pain does he still carry, even with a 9-figure net worth? Because behind that laugh is a storm you wouldn't believe. In this video, we're diving deep, not into the Steve Harvey everyone sees, but into the man who clawed his way out of homelessness, heartbreak, and financial ruin. All while the world watched him crack jokes on stage. We'll unpack his most painful moments, the scandals that almost ended him, and the comeback that made him a legend. Not just in comedy, but in life. If you've ever felt stuck, like the world's forgotten you, Steve's story might just be the blueprint for your second chance. So grab your seat. This one's not just entertainment. It's a masterclass in surviving when the world tells you you're finished. Let's begin. Steve Harvey was born in Welch, West Virginia, a small coal mining town where hope wasn't something you grew up with. His family had very little, but they had each other. His father, a hard-working coal miner, and his mother, a devout Christian, taught him about faith and resilience. But even in those early years, life had a cruel way of testing him. As a child, Steve had a debilitating stutter. He couldn't even say his own name out loud without getting stuck. Kids mocked him, teachers dismissed him, and every day felt like a battle just to be understood. He once tried to introduce himself as Steve, but couldn't get past the S. That moment, frozen, embarrassed in front of his class, stayed with him for years. And then one day, something bold happened. Steve's teacher gave the class a simple assignment. Write down what you want to be when you grow up. While other kids scribbled things like firefighter or teacher, Steve wrote 6 words that would change everything. I want to be on TV. His classmates burst into laughter, but it was his teacher's reaction that cut the deepest. She called him out, ridiculed him in front of the class, and said, "You'll never be on television. Pick something realistic." Humiliated, Steve went home crushed, but instead of tearing up the paper, he showed it to his father, and in that moment, something powerful happened. His dad didn't laugh. He didn't criticize. He told Steve to fold that paper up, put it in his drawer, and read it every morning and every night. "Let them laugh," he said, "but don't let them be right." That paper, with those 6 words, would follow Steve Harvey for decades. Through every failure, every heartbreak, and every night he spent alone. It reminded him who he was meant to be. But chasing that dream, it would cost him everything. And the struggle was just beginning. By his mid-20s, Steve Harvey had bounced through a series of dead-end jobs: mailman, carpet cleaner, insurance salesman. Nothing stuck, but something inside him kept whispering, "This isn't it." In 1985, Steve finally listened. He entered an open mic night at a local comedy club. No backup plan, no stage experience. Just a joke, a microphone, and a dream that refused to die. And when he stepped on that stage, something clicked. The crowd laughed, really laughed. For the first time in his life, Steve felt seen, not mocked, not misunderstood, seen. That night he made $50, and on the drive home, he decided, this is it. This is what I'm meant to do. But dreams don't pay rent. For the next 3 years, Steve lived out of his car, a 1976 Ford Tempo that doubled as his bedroom, kitchen, and closet. He washed up in public restrooms before shows, ate what he could, slept where he parked, and more than once, he almost gave up. One night, he sat in his car with nothing in his pocket and nowhere to go. And just when the weight of failure felt unbearable, the phone rang. It was the showtime at the Apollo Comedy Showcase. They had an opening, a last-minute cancellation. They wanted him. The catch? The show was in New York City, and Steve was broke. Stranded in Florida with barely enough gas to get to the next city, let alone across the country. But somehow, he scraped together just enough money to make it. He drove all night, arrived exhausted, and stepped onto the Apollo stage as a complete unknown.
Can I get a chance, please?
He left as a star. The crowd roared. The host shook his hand. And for the first time, Hollywood started to take notice. That performance led to more gigs, bigger stages. TV came calling. Steve Harvey was finally on his way. But even success has a price, because just as his career began to soar, Steve's personal life started to crumble, and the pain that followed would nearly break him. Hosting nationally televised shows, headlining comedy tours, and even landing acting roles. In 1994, he starred in Me and the Boys, and just 2 years later, the Steve Harvey Show hit the airwaves, becoming a major success. By the late 90s, Steve wasn't just making people laugh, he was becoming a household name. And then came the Kings of Comedy Tour. Alongside Bernie Mac, Cedric the Entertainer, and D.L. Hewley, Steve helped launch one of the highest-grossing comedy tours of all time. Night after night, they packed stadiums. Laughter echoed across arenas. And for Steve, it seemed like everything he'd ever wanted was finally his. But behind the curtain, things were falling apart. At home, his marriage to Marcia, his first wife, and the mother of his 3 children, was strained. The long nights, the relentless touring, the pressure of fame, it was too much. And after years of holding on, the relationship collapsed. He tried again with his second wife, Mary Shackelford. But the marriage was turbulent, ending in a bitter divorce that spilled into the headlines. Accusations flew, public opinion turned. And Steve, once America's funny man, became tabloid fodder overnight. The emotional toll was devastating, but it didn't stop there. Amid the chaos, Steve's finances crumbled. His accountant had failed to file taxes for 7 years. A mistake Steve didn't even know about until the IRS came knocking. When he checked his bank account, only $1,700 remained. The man who once sold out stadiums was now flat broke. It was a free fall, public, humiliating, and painful. But Steve didn't quit. He went back to the grind, hosting radio shows, taking every gig he could find, and writing books. He worked like a man possessed, not to get rich again, but to reclaim his name, his dignity, and his place in the world. And somewhere in the midst of that storm, he found something he'd never truly had before: clarity. Because while he was rebuilding his life, brick by brick, Steve began to understand that money, fame, and applause didn't define him. But family, purpose, and legacy, that's where the real power was. And that revelation would lead him to the greatest comeback of his career. When most people would have disappeared, buried under scandal, debt, and defeat, Steve Harvey did the opposite. He rebuilt. He took a job many entertainers would have turned down. Radio. Early mornings, 5 a.m. Call times, 5 days a week. No flashing lights, no big paychecks. But Steve knew what he was doing. His morning radio show wasn't just a paycheck. It was his platform to reconnect, to inspire, to rebuild trust with the people. And he didn't waste it. He poured wisdom into every segment. Not just jokes, but life lessons, soul-deep reflections, raw truth. And people listened, millions of them. He found his voice again, not just as a comedian, but as a mentor, a motivator, a man with something to say. Then came Family Feud.
Name a business that might be very busy on Valentine's Day.
Florist.
At first, it seemed like a strange match, a loud, expressive comedian hosting a slow-paced game show. But within months, the ratings skyrocketed. Steve brought charm, edge, unpredictability. And suddenly, Family Feud wasn't just a game. It was a hit. One opportunity led to another. Best-selling books like Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Man exploded onto the charts, launching a movie franchise and bringing in millions. He hosted beauty pageants, motivational conferences, launched a foundation, and built an empire most would never recover from, let alone rise into. But through it all, one person kept him grounded. Marjorie, his third wife, the woman he credits for giving him peace, structure, and purpose. With her, he formed a blended family of 7 children, each of them part of the second chance Steve had fought so hard to earn. He once broke down on national TV, reading a birthday letter from his kids. One line in particular made him cry. "You gave me your last name, even when you didn't have to. There's no one better than you, Dad." It wasn't the money. It wasn't the fame. It was this. After decades of chaos, he finally had what he was searching for: peace, respect, and love. But even then, Steve couldn't shake the past, because even after rebuilding everything, he still lived with the fear of losing it all again. And that fear became his fuel. Today, Steve Harvey is more than a comedian. He's a mogul. With a reported net worth in the 9 figures, he owns a media company, a fashion label, multiple homes, and enough custom suits to fill a department store. He travels by private jet, owns luxury cars, and wears timepieces that cost more than most people's salaries. But if you asked Steve about his greatest achievements, he wouldn't mention any of that. He'd talk about his faith, his family, and how he wakes up every morning, still haunted by the memory of that Ford Tempo. You see, success didn't erase the pain. It sharpened it. Because deep down, Steve still fears losing it all again. And that fear? It drives him harder than ever. He never gets too comfortable. He never forgets what it feels like to go hungry, to be laughed at, to cry alone in a car with nothing but a notebook and a dream. He says it plainly. I never want to go back. So I keep going forward, but age catches up with everyone, even the legends. Steve has opened up about his health. The years of grinding, the pressure, the late nights, they've taken a toll. He's not invincible, and he knows it. He's talked about slowing down, passing on wisdom, and ensuring that his legacy isn't built on laughs, but on impact. He mentors young comedians. donates millions through his foundation, lifts others the way no one lifted him. And maybe that's the final chapter of this story, not just the rise, the fall, and the rise again, but the hand he now extends to those still in the valley. Because Steve Harvey's story isn't just about beating the odds. It's about never letting those odds define you. It's about writing your dream on a piece of paper and refusing to let the world tear it up. And in the end, when the cameras are off and the spotlight fades, that stuttering kid from West Virginia proved one thing. You don't have to be perfect to be powerful. You just have to keep going. Steve Harvey's journey isn't just inspiring. It's real, raw, imperfect. The kind of story that reminds us that success isn't reserved for the lucky. It's earned by the relentless. He failed. He fell. He faced public embarrassment, personal heartbreak, and complete financial collapse. Not once, but multiple times. And yet, he kept going. From a stuttering boy in a coal town, to sleeping in a car, to becoming one of the most recognizable figures in television, Steve Harvey's life proves that no situation is too broken to rebuild. But the most powerful part? He never forgot who he was. Even with fame, fortune, and global recognition, he stayed rooted in faith, driven by fear, and grounded by family. That's what makes him different. That's what makes him unforgettable. So now, I want to ask you something. What's your dream on paper? What's that one goal the world laughed at, that you haven't let go of? Drop it in the comments, because your story might be the spark someone else needs to keep going. And if Steve's journey moved you even a little, hit that like button. It lets us know you want more stories like this. Subscribe for deeper dives, untold truths, and the real stories behind the people you think you know. Because just like Steve said, your setback is just a setup for your comeback. And your next chapter? It could start today.